one key element of the Mexico City, from going from changing the law to provision of services, I think one key element was, again, the women's movement worked very closely with the Mexico City government or the federal district government at the time to ensure that abortion services would be provided the next day, literally the next day when the abortion was decriminalized. Abortion services were being provided in the public facilities. And
Wow.
again, like this is very important, and it's different because when the government, when the public facilities provide abortion services, you normalize it.
Hello, I'm Françoise Girard, and welcome to the Famous podcast. Today, I have the great pleasure of welcoming María Antonieta Alcalde of Mexico City to the podcast. María Antonieta is a long-standing advocate and activist for sexual and reproductive health and rights, in particular abortion rights. Until recently, she was the director of the Ipas office in Latin America, which advances access to abortion and changes in abortion law. Let's talk with María Antonieta today about what's been going on in Mexico and in the rest of Latin America on abortion. Hello, María Antonieta. It's really very nice to see you. It's such a pleasure to have you on the Famous podcast. I'm really pleased to have you on the show today because I really want to talk about something positive in matters of abortion, and in particular, the very positive changes in abortion law and abortion access in a number of countries of Latin America in the last few years. And it's exciting in its own right, but it's also going to be very inspirational for us in the United States right now, where we're dealing with such terrible circumstances. So we need some inspiration and some of the boldness of the Latin American movement. So, and of course, you're in Mexico City, and you were for 5 years, I think, the head
Yes.
of IPAS's Latin America office.
Yeah.
And IPAS is focused on access to abortion and changes in abortion law. So you've been steeped in this content for a long time, and even before that, because you were
Before that.
with International Planned Parenthood Federation, and you also founded your own organization as a young woman in Mexico City, Balance, right? So you've had a long track record in this field. And it's really interesting, I think, also to see the change in Latin America, considering that it was historically a very traditional region, very Catholic region, and yet, the change has been profound and is accelerating, in fact. So let's start with Mexico, where you live. I'm particularly interested in Mexico because the change happened quite fast when it started. Can you tell us a bit what happened? How was this possible?
Sure.
Was it the women's movement? Was it the green scarves movement, feminist groups? Who else? Who was involved in making this rapid change in
Yes.
access to abortion in Mexico?
Thank you. And it is a pleasure for me being here. And this topic is my favorite topic. So it's like, thank you for having me. And well, right now, as you know, and your audience may know, Mexico has an abortion law where abortion is legal in all the country for several exceptions. But in the last 5 years, abortion has been decriminalized, and as in the U.S., Mexico, it's a federation. So each state has its own penal code, its own health law. So there is a need to work at the federal level, but also to work at the state level. And right now in Mexico, we have 32 states. All of them, you can have access to abortion for some exclusion, rape, when the life of the pregnant woman is in danger. But in 23 states up to now, abortion is legal up to 12 weeks and beyond 12 weeks for the different exclusions. And these changes make it legal without the requirement of a doctor or like a husband, by the decision of the woman. It has been very exciting. And although it feels like it has been fast, Actually, the first change that we had in Mexico was in 2007 in Mexico City, that Mexico City decriminalized abortion. And when that happened, the feminist movement, and I was a part of it, and I'm very proud of it, we thought then all the changes will come. Like this is just the beginning. And just the opposite happened. Like what we saw was a regression at the state level. Many states started putting the protection of the life of the unborn child in their constitutions.
Wow.
And it needed to happen 9 years for the next state, that was Oaxaca, that was in 2019, to decriminalize again. And then in 2021, the Supreme Court released a decision that said that criminalizing abortion was against human rights and was unconstitutional. And from that moment, we started seeing one state after the other coming. But I think that what is important for me to say here, like it's although from 2019 to now, we have seen all these rapid changes, and now we have 23 states that have changes their penal codes. The process was long, and
Yeah.
it required a lot of um, like a feminist movement that was smart enough and strategic enough to work in every front. We mobilize at the local level. And if you see, for example, the marches that we have in Mexico, well, not in Mexico, but especially in Mexico City, in March 8th, when everyone is wearing the green bandana and that. But if you move back 20 years ago, it was just a few of us. So there was a lot of work to mobilize at the very grassroots level. There was a lot of work at the political level with decision makers, like advocacy, with a lot of like the political parties. There was a lot of litigation also, and the work at the core was like very important. And there was also a lot of communications, like I mean, like kind of like the convincing the general public that this was so. But it took a lot of time, and now I think that we're seeing in Mexico is like we are like harvesting the successes of all the support and the investment in really creating a movement.
Mm. And it's interesting that you mentioned the different actors. I'm curious about the role of the courts, because the courts have, with the initial decision of the Supreme Court, which applied to the entire country,
Yeah,
but then each state also had to intervene basically and implement that, right? Even though
yeah.
the Supreme Court said it's anti-constitutional to criminalize abortion, you needed action state by state. At that point, the legislatures picked it up in each state, or was it still the courts at the state level that made the change?
It was like it was very interesting because the court in the like the way that the Supreme Court and the judicial system works in Mexico, it was uh, they analyze a case, their decision apply to that specific case. So it's not an overall decision. So
Right.
the decision that the Supreme Court took in 2021 was about one state, the state of Coahuila in the north of the country. And basically the state changed their penal code, and the case was brought to to make stronger criminalization on abortion, and the case was brought to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, well, you Coahuila, you need to change your penal
Aha.
code because your penal code it violates human rights. But it was only Coahuila that like the decision
Right.
will apply only to Coahuila. But at the same time, the statement of the court applies to the entire judicial system. So in the legislative branch, it was only Coahuila that it needed to change. But in the judicial branch, all the judicial branch needed to take the decision of the court. And so from that moment, we said like abortion was really decriminalized in the entire country, because what the court says is like no women, no medical professional
Mm.
should be put in jail, because criminalizing abortion, it's against human rights and against constitution. So now every case that is brought to any judge in the country saying like, oh, this woman had an abortion, that judge need to fail in favor of the woman, because
Mm-hmm.
they need to follow. Like, so in that sense, we have a situation when abortion is decriminalized de facto
Yeah.
because no other woman should put in jail. At the same time, the stigma and the persecution is still there. Like the case could be brought to the, so we need to work on that. And on top of that, and this is different than in the United States, in Mexico, we have a social security system, a public health system that, so like there is a need for this public health system for the government to start providing services for free
Yeah.
to everyone. So that's why we needed, like, although abortion is decriminalized de facto, we needed to go state by state to the legislations, to the congresses, to ensure that they change the law at the state level and also at the federal level for two reasons. One, well, for several reasons, but the first one is I think that it makes the change more stable.
Yeah.
It's less easy for anyone just to change it, as we saw in the US, that
Mm-hmm.
then the court changed and then they decided to have another decision and then that applies for the entire country. If you go state by state and ensure that you have a strong law at the state level,
Mm-hmm.
then you are safer. And then second, we decided to do it because we needed the government to provide services. We needed like to ensure that everyone who had the right to have services, that right includes the abortion services. And the third one is because of stigma, because we really need to remove abortion from every penal code. Abortion is the only health service that is legislated by the penal code and not by the health law. So we needed to completely remove it. So now our aim as a movement is to remove abortion from the penal codes, and that cannot only happen working with the courts. We also need with the legislative branch.
Mm-hmm. And that's those are very different strategies. I assume, like,
Yeah,
for the litigation part, you need your lawyers, your strategic litigators, and then for dealing with the legislatures, you need the lobbyists and the people who really are going to visit these congressional or legislative offices and talk to the staff and present model laws, etc. So it's quite a different,
exactly.
yeah.
And also social mobilization, I
Yeah.
think, for both of them, but especially for the Congress, given that the Congress, and that may change in Mexico, because now the judges will be elected by the public, that there was a
Ah.
judicial reform, but that's another very exciting topic. But the legislative branch, like the Congress people, are elected. I mean, they have like an electorate, like they
Mm-hmm.
need to hear. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that the social mobilization part has been crucial to have, like as I was mentioning before, like these marches of thousands and thousands of people in the street claiming for abortion rights has been fundamental for the Congress people, like to listen and to be able to open the doors and say, okay, we want to talk to you, we want to understand what you want, and yeah, that has been important.
Right. If they want to get reelected, they have to pay attention to this.
Exactly.
Yeah. And um, the Marea Verde, the green
The
scarves,
green
that
scarf,
movement made its way to Mexico. Now you were using those
absolutely.
symbols, right? Which are now pan-American, pretty much, except in the
Yes.
U.S. I don't think we've caught
I
on to
hope
that.
that, like, I've been
Yeah.
seeing some of it like
Some,
in
yeah.
different places, yeah, but not
But
yet.
yeah.
And that's maybe a key part of the strategy too. Like the Mexican movement, it's a movement very well connected with the movement in Latin America. I mean, and the movement in other parts of the world. And I think that that has been crucial to advance the agenda, because we have been learning not only from our own Mexican local experience, but we have been learning from the experiences in other countries, in Uruguay, in Argentina, in Colombia, but also in Poland, in Ireland. And that has been crucial to be able to design strategies that like took those lessons. So like the Marea Verde, I think it's a symbol of that, because it's a symbol that was created in Argentina, and it has a lot of very Argentinian references. Like the idea of the scarf, actually, it's taken from a sister movement, that is the movement of the mothers that lose their child, their child disappear during the war and during the dictatorships in Argentina, and they use this scarf and they put it on around their heads, and
Right.
it was a white scarf, and it's like the madres of Plaza de Mayo,
Yeah.
like there's these mothers that were looking for their kids. So the bandana, the scarf, it's a very Argentinian, not the green, but there was white, and it's a model of silent resistance, of resilience, of so like the movement took the symbol of the scarf and it put green, like put it in green that is like hope and is life, and then started taking it, and it was very powerful in Argentina. Like, and I think what happened in Argentina was very like, and we can talk about it, like interesting because there was a huge mobilization in 2017, 2018 that brought the abortion law, like bill, to the Congress. It passed the lower chamber. And then when it came to the Senate, we lose. We lose
Yeah.
for 3 votes. And it was so painful. And it was really devastating. But then we got stronger. Like the movement got stronger. And then people that in the past didn't say anything, they were suddenly like tying the green scarf. And I went to Buenos Aires, I remember in 2019, and you have like you were in the subway and you just saw these high school kids with their backpacks and the green scarf just there. And it was a symbol of movement. It was a symbol like we are stronger. So you didn't, of course, you went to the marches and that, but it was like you see it in the street
Everywhere.
everywhere.
Mm.
And that was very important. It was like kind of holding hands, especially when we lose, like that, this idea of like kind of embracing all of us by having this symbol. uh, this symbol became something as part of our daily life. It's not something that you do only for the marches, like you have it with you all the time. And that was very important for 2020, at the end of 2020, in the middle of the pandemic and all of that. The law was passed with a huge social mobilization, and that was possible because of that, because of resilience, because of movement building, but also because we found, or they found, this symbol that like actually created like this massive movement. And then in the rest of the region, in Colombia, also in Central America, where the situation is really hard, and in Mexico, the green scarf has become the symbol. And every time that you go to, and even wearing green, that I wear green all the time, and like it's a symbol of your conviction to advance women's rights, especially abortion rights. So that has become very important too.
Yeah, and it's a cultural marker almost,
Yeah.
that, yeah, it's full of meaning and it goes everywhere, right? People wear it as a
Yes.
bracelet.
You
They wear,
wear, I
yeah,
have it in every bag
yeah,
that I
that's
own.
right.
Like I have it like there.
Yeah.
And also I mean, it happens to me that like I'm walking on the streets, like, oh, a green scarf. I don't have one. And it's like, oh, I always have an extra one in my bag because I've been like giving to people, and people are proud. Like I have friends who said like, who, I mean, have different green scarves, but they really cherish the first one, and I remember who gave it to them. So you create this network of people that are connected by this cultural symbol that is the green scarf now.
Getting back to Mexico City, because you described how in 2007 Mexico City, the federal
Mhm.
district,
District at
Mexico,
that time,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, decriminalized abortion, and that was kind of an experiment in a way, right? On the only place in the country where this was
Yeah.
possible. And of course, it led to lots of people coming to Mexico City to obtain abortions where they couldn't obtain it in their own state. What was the importance of that experiment, or if you want, of that change,
Yeah.
as a kind of a first foot, towards the reform?
I think that one key element of the Mexico City, like I mean, like from going from changing the law to provision of services, I think one key element was, again, the women's movement worked very closely with the Mexico City government or the federal district government at the time to ensure that abortion services would be provided the next day, literally the next day that the abortion was decriminalized. Abortion services were being provided in the public facilities. And
Wow.
again, like this is very important, and it's different because when the government, when the public facilities provide abortion services, you normalize it. It becomes part of the norm. When you have to go to your private provider and again pay for a health service that, like in Mexico, it's a right, it's supposed to be for free. then it's like the exception. It's only for some people, for the people who can afford it, for the people. When it becomes part of the norm, is central, and it was it's kind of the like I mean yeah like a it becomes a right, a real right because the government fulfill it. So in that sense, I mean like that work that most of the time happens behind the scenes of training the medical professionals, like ensuring that the facilities had what they needed, ensuring that there is no re-stigmatization of the women that ask for the services was crucial, and it moved really fast. And Mexico City established specialized clinics that still work up to these days to provide abortion services to ensure that the women that ask for these services were not being kind of stigmatized by going like in to like a general service and say, oh, who are the women who are having the abortion? So I think that that was very important. The other thing that was important was like the also the women's movement and Balance, the organization that I found, was a key player also on establishing funds. Like I mean, supporting that, like that we see a lot of those in the U.S. Like in terms of supporting women to come to Mexico City,
Yeah.
not only by paying for their I mean airplane ticket or bus tickets and hotel, but also by supporting them, like going to the airport, pick them up. Mexico City is a huge city, bringing them to the clinics and that, and that was very important. And then later on, uh, abortion, I mean, like the technology on abortion came. Like I mean, at the beginning they were doing some, most of it was like manual aspiration, that, but then the pills came, and mifepristone and misoprostol came, and that really changed the dynamic because in Mexico City, in Mexico in general, but in all Latin America, women, I mean, actually, like the first time that like misoprostol was used for abortion was in Latin America. It was the Brazilian women who organized themselves, and they said, we have something here.
Yeah.
So that really changed the dynamic because the women didn't need it. Like at the beginning, like Fondo Maria, for example, that is like this program of Balance that supported women to fund to come to Mexico. They realized that women didn't needed to travel to Mexico to have a safe abortion, that they needed just to support them and to ensure that they have access to. At the beginning it was only misoprostol, but then later it was both mife and miso. So the accompaniment or acompañamiento model was started with the idea of like small group of women, and we saw this everywhere. Suddenly started saying, you don't have to travel. I can support you through the phone and I can send you the pills.
By
Or you
mail.
can
Yeah.
go to your pharmacy. And in Mexico, you can buy misoprostol over the counter. And now you can buy also mifepristone over the counter. So women was like, okay, this is the process, go to your pharmacy. And it is very interesting because at the beginning, especially the medical community was very scared about this model, saying
Yeah.
it's super dangerous, like there's going to be a lot of problems. And then we've been doing this for 20 years, and it's a very successful model, self-managed abortion. It's very safe. Now we have the guidelines of the WHO, but like I think at the beginning, the Mexico City services, like at like 2007 to 2012, maybe they had a lot of pressure from the rest of the country, where like people were traveling to Mexico City. But later that decreased, and I think that that decrease was due to the accompaniment model that like the different feminist groups and women's group decided to adopt to support other women. And that's what we see right now. Although there's a lot of people still traveling to Mexico City because a lot of women prefer to see a doctors, to go to a clinic. And that's, I think that the role of our role as part of the feminist movement should be to open as many pathways possible for women to have access to a safe abortion. If a woman wants to self-manage, that's fine. If they want to come to a clinic, that's
Yeah.
fine. If they want it to be a public clinic or private, that's like I think we should be open. And that's exactly what has been happening in Mexico overall, but especially in Mexico City. I think now women in Mexico City have many options to have a safe and legal abortion.
And that's really the definition of choice, isn't it? Right?
Exactly.
That's it. You have many
But you have
options.
options.
Yeah, you have many
Exactly.
options. And so, given that you have 23 states that have decriminalized. I assume the law is different from state to state in how they're conceiving, like the actual offer of services. Is the access very different from one place to the other at the moment? What is the
It
challenge you're
is.
facing now?
The law, it's more or less like most of them kind of copy paste Mexico City law. Like, so in most of the states, abortion is legal up to 12 weeks, just by choice. And after 12 weeks, by different exceptions like rape, health, etc. And and that has been like, again, like the standard. We feel that now, and in Mexico City there is a bill that is being discussed in the Congress, already passed, like the commissions, to remove abortion from the penal code. So you don't have gestational limits, you don't have,
Yeah,
because we know
yeah.
that that delays access and also creates stigma. So what we have is, like in Mexico City right now, like there are very well established services. Women, like although we have the law up to 12 weeks, like really women have access abortion after that, because we have all the exceptions, and the exceptions have been working well in the public system, but also in the private system. In the states where abortion is just being decriminalized, they are just establishing the service. And I think that the roles of organizations, for example, like Ipas, that they've been working with the local ministries of health to ensure that they have what they need to start providing services, and they train medical doctors. This has been crucial, because now we have 23 states that suddenly they have to provide this service, but they don't know how to do it. And many of them are reluctant. Some of them are more open to do it. But yeah, access is very uneven. And I think like here is where, again, the accompaniment model has still played a significant role, because they have been there supporting women and providing the service regardless the law,
Right.
and women still come to them. And what is needed now is that the government really step up and start providing services. And that's something that is still pending in some states.
Yeah, that's interesting. That understanding that no matter what the legal status has been, feminists have organized these networks of accompaniment and distribution of pills anyway,
Exactly.
because women will access abortion when they need abortion, period, whether it's legal or not.
Exactly.
And it just speaks to that reality that it's never going to change, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting, because the accompaniment model, I always said, is it's a model for access, but it's a like kind of a civic resistance model, saying when the law is wrong, we disobey. We disobey. And like, I mean, and I always have, like, I have a huge admiration for the organizations that have been providing these services, because they were the ones who really uh, took the risk to say, okay, the law is wrong, and women are going through horrible processes, and we won't allow it. We won't allow it when we know there's a safe way that they can self-manage to have access. And I think it's right now, it's still in Mexico. That component was also very important to advance the law. I think that there has been thousands and thousands of women that suddenly, like people like that could be very conservative, very Catholic. Mexico is still 90%
Yes.
Catholic. So
Yes.
like a big part of like the women that had access to abortion through the accompaniment groups, they were Catholics. And they suddenly realized that it was not these horrible pictures that the anti-choice movement plays, that they were in their houses self-managing their process, and they were safe. And this is something, and like just thinking that someone may die for not having access to that. I see. So I think that the accompaniment model was very important, like kind of an underground process of changing the minds and hearts of women by having access to abortion. Or maybe they're like their friends, their sisters, their daughters had access to abortion in the context of illegality, and realize it's not what I thought it was. This is actually like a safe. This is actually there is no baby crying. Please don't kill me. Like it's safe. It's safe, and it's like a right. So I think that like that also play a role on what we saw later. like suddenly a society that was open and willing and pushing for advance this agenda. So I think like that component, like sometimes we oversight it, but I do feel that it plays a significant role.
And you mentioned doctors resisting the abortion pills because, of course, it does remove them from the equation, right? When they're not performing the vacuum aspiration. Um, do you have a problem with doctors denying services and invoking their religious beliefs or personal beliefs to, what they call conscientious objection, although it's not actually
Yeah.
conscientious objection because the person who suffers the consequences isn't the doctors, it's the patients. So is that an issue, and who's behind that? Like, who's pushing for that?
Yeah, because I mean, like I fully agree with you. I think that we need to revisit the concept of conscientious objection. And in Mexico, we had a group of doctors that when abortion was illegal, that said that they provide services of abortion because of conscientious objection, because they couldn't live with their conscience knowing that they were denying the service to a woman that required. And I think that we need to put in, when if we talk about consensus objection, we need
That's
to put
it.
that,
Yeah.
because those are the doctors that were like saying, I cannot deny the service because of my own conscience. So I think that we need to name like the people that claim consensual objection and deny services. That's denial of services due to religious beliefs and that. And it's interesting, in Mexico, the Supreme Court also had a ruling on consensual objection. And it was very interesting because they said that I mean, like the Congress needed to regulate it, that it was like it was not a right by itself, but it was an expression of the right of conscience. And then, but it put a list. Actually, the Supreme Court put a list of the type of regulation. So, for example, saying like, um, you need to, if you are an objector, you need to express that, and like before like that you start serving women, like if like the conscientious objection, like this expression is an individual expression, so it's not cannot be an institutional expression.
Right.
You cannot have
A whole
full
hospital.
hospitals or
Yeah.
clinics saying we're objectors, like and beyond that, if a hospital had an objector, they need to ensure they had other doctors that were willing to provide the services. Like they said, like only like they can, like the people that can refuse the service is only the medical professionals that are actually performing the services. The social worker, the nurse, the policeman in the door, they cannot claim that they will deny the service due to like this objection. So it was very important. And in Mexico, there is a law that right now is being discussed, and it's already passed the lower chamber and hopefully will pass the Senate, putting these limits to this. So it's
Uh-huh.
not, and the president of the Supreme Court said it at that time, it's not a blank check to deny service. It's not just a blank check to say like, oh, we won't provide abortion services to anyone. No, it's actually a regulation. And I think it is very positive because it allows, I mean, it open, like, I mean, no one should be forced, no medical professionals should be forced to provide a service that it's against their own beliefs. But at the same time, most of all, what the Supreme Court did was protect the women and the people that needed the service, putting limits to these claims. And still in Mexico, like the bill is being negotiated in the Congress, but this is still an issue. And I think, as you mentioned at the beginning, we need to be like the framing of this, I think is the wrong one because, like as
Right.
you said, it makes it look like the only people with conscience are the
The
doctors that are
doctors,
denying the service,
the
when it's
patients have no.
completely,
Yeah.
exactly, completely the other way around.
Right, right. And I mean, the doctors that are performing when it's illegal, that's conscientious objection and it's
Exactly,
civic disobedience. But when you suffer no consequence, then you can't claim that. You're just denying services, which
exactly.
is unethical. I mean, medically unethical as far as I'm concerned. So you spoke about the role of the experience across Latin America, how the Argentine campaigns to decriminalize abortion, inspired, the Mexican campaigns. And you also spoke a bit about the fact that Colombia has also been one of the countries that has shown the way. Can you tell me a little bit about how that has happened? Like, is it, annual meetings, or are there organizations that where everyone gets together to learn from each other?
I think it's a combination. Like we don't have. There is like, I mean, like the Latin Americas, we have every other year now the Latin American encounter, where like different movements get together, and it's like a space of sharing knowledge and that. But beyond that, like that has been very important. I think that there has been a strong tradition of the Latin Americans to see ourselves as a movement. So the feminist encounters are one space where we together. There are other spaces. For example, the movement has a strong presence on advocating at the regional bodies. So we do have like the Inter-American human rights system. There is a like an expression of the feminist movement that works there together. At ECLAC, that is like the Latin American UN, there is a like part of the movement. So I think that there are different spaces. So although we have the national movements, when I think about the feminist movement, I think it's like a movement that understands that like borders are fake, and that the reality of like a Mexican is like it's not that different from our sisters in Guatemala and Salvador and Nicaragua, although our political regimes are different than that. And I think that that's one of the strengths of the movement in the region, that from the beginning, it has always been a movement that is open, that it has like it's a regional movement, it's a global movement, it's a movement with no barrier. That of course we understand, and this is a discussion that the movement had in the past in terms of like we cannot establish cookie cutter strategies. Of course, the reality. I remember when Uruguay changed the law and they were like so ahead. And
Yeah.
then we have like or Colombia that right now has the most progressive law in the region, and it's one of the most progressives in the world, where like abortion is allowed up to 24 weeks, no questions asked, and like so it's very open. And at the same time, Latin America is the region that has the most countries that completely criminalize abortion. We have El Salvador, Nicaragua, Honduras, Dominican Republic, where abortion it's prohibited there
Completely.
is no exception. Like, I mean, we have had cases of 10-year-old girls pregnant with like, I mean, like, or like cases where like women pregnant with unviable childs with like, and no exceptions. So it's a region like of a lot of polarization. And at the same time, the feminist movement have found ways to support each other and to look at ourselves. And we do it through these meetings, but it's beyond. I think that from the core, this is a movement with no borders.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, it goes back a long way. As you say, the Brazilian feminists who figured out that they could use misoprostol to induce abortion, we're talking, several decades ago. That knowledge spread quickly. The
Absolutely.
accompaniment model with abortion pills originating out of Argentina, the litigation originating out of Colombia, all these tactics and um, strategies have been discussed and debated and shared, right?
Mm.
I mean, it's been
And I
very
think
rich.
that's crucial. And for me, when I think about the US movement, that's for me one of the weaknesses, or that has been, I think that now
Yes.
with what had happened for the first time, I think that when Roe was overturned, I saw the movement, the US movement really willing to say, okay, what is happening beyond the borders? I think that I had like a lot of, I mean, like I have never had that many calls of people like saying like, can you come and share your experience of how are you doing this in El Salvador? How are you doing this? Like, but before that, the US movement traditionally has been very kind of separate from the rest of the
Right.
movement. Like this idea, like no, no, like this, like American exceptionalism, like in a way, like this idea of
We've
like
got
we're
it. We've
different.
got it. Yeah.
Yeah, we already got it. We're different, like that. And I think that was a liability for the movement, that they were not learning and understanding kind of like how the rest of the world had been approaching this. So I'm really like, I mean, kind of like my silver lining on what is happening is like now I see the US movement more open and willing to be part of the Americas movement, but also the worldwide movement.
Yeah, definitely I'm seeing that too. Suddenly turning around and say, is there something feminists in repressive countries have learned that we could benefit from? What are their
Exactly.
tactics? And in particular, I think the rise of the abortion pill in the US, which has been very remarkable, I think, in the last few years, and the self
Yeah.
help and the underground work. Um, yeah, and the funds for travel, not all that existed before, but now it's a lot of it takes its inspiration from the work of our sisters in Latin America. Thank you, Maria Antonieta. It's a real pleasure talking to you, and thanks for this inspiration, and
Thank you,
so much
Noah.
sending all the love and the luck to all of you over there in Mexico City, and a luta continua.
Exactly. Like, thank you so much for having like for having these spaces and for like open these spaces to share what is happening in Latin America that I do feel is inspiring and at the same time challenging, but we can all, I mean, like the only way to overcome what is happening is working together. So thank you very much.